It's been months in the making. It's finally here. Round one of your fantasy football season. Whether you're playing Dream Team, SuperCoach, or AFL Fantasy, you've put probably way too many hours into your team, but now it all starts to count. No more free hits, no more looks. Once Thursday night's game gets underway, the rolling lockout commences, and teams and positions and players get locked in to your starting squad. Here on this episode, I've got a last-minute fantasy footy checklist just to make sure that everything is sitting in the right pockets and spots before you get to round one. Look, let's hit the basics. You shouldn't need this reminder, but sometimes the basics are very important and get forgotten. Once a team gets officially named, so the Thursday night team's on Wednesday, the rest of the round on Thursday night, and then the Friday night at 5 o'clock Melbourne time or Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the Sunday squads get locked in. Once they're named, are you seeing green dots or not? If you're not seeing green dots, time to jump off. Then make sure that those things are corrected if they're not. That your squads are filled, that you've got your emergency on every single line, that you're happy with who you've placed your VC and C on. Like these are, I know they're the basics that I probably didn't want to start with them, but I felt like it would be doing you a disservice if I just didn't cover off those things. They're the obvious basics, helpful. I hope you haven't been tripped up by them, but if you have, that's okay. There's still plenty of other tips that's going to get you through. Here's your last minute checklist. Let's run you through them. Really, the most important number one, know your why behind every player. In your squad of 30 for AFL Fantasy and 31 in SuperCoach and Dream Team, you shouldn't just have a player picked because you need someone picked in that spot. Every single person has a purpose in your team, and you need to be able to articulate what that is. Are they there because they are a captaincy option for you and you want someone early that can deliver you reliable captaincy scores regardless of the opposition? Are they there because you believe they're a breakout in their line and have got the potential to jump into the premium echelons? Do you believe they're a mid-pricer that's going to deliver you significant value and as a result generate 20, 30, 40 points per game above what they're priced at? Or are they a cash cow there that are ultimately, you hope their scores are either not needed or fall away drastically and maybe get the odd Harry Sheasel or Nick Dacos type of debut scores? Yeah, just lock it in. Every single person has a reason. Even if you're running a red dot rookie, they've got to be there for a reason, not like, well, it's the best I can afford. Worst logic in fantasy footy ever. They're there to loop, well, whatever it is. Do you know why every player's in your team? If you don't know why, you probably need to do one of two things. Change that player or reevaluate elements of your side and your structure. That's why I'm giving you this episode more than the day before, to give you the chance to know your why behind every player. If you don't know it, you need to go and figure that out. Second best bit of advice and checklist I can give you is, do you have a backup plan? It's something that none of us care to admit, but as we head towards these teams getting named, it especially can be in the spaces of cash cows and some of our mid-price guys that just don't get named. They just don't get picked. I'll give you an illustration to highlight that point. I know a lot of people are really, really hopeful that the Saints drop a bunch of these cash cow price guys in our teams. Boxall, Hasty, Hall. We're hoping for probably at least one of them in our starting squad. But what happens if we don't get the one you're anticipating? What if the mid-price guy in your backline doesn't get named, staying with the Saints for illustrations purposes? What if a Schoenmaker doesn't get named? What if Marshall gets named and you were planning on running Boyd at R3 as a playing option, not just as a red dot rookie? And now he's no longer named because Marshall's there. Yes, I'm using the Saints to keep the illustration pure, but you've got to have a backup plan in case something goes wrong. What are these parachute outlets that you've got? Okay, if this player doesn't pick, does it hold my structure or do I need to change? Do this now, because as it gets closer to lockouts starting to hit through, it's going to get chaotic and it's going to get frantic. Build your backup plans now in the hope that you never need them. But should you have, they're reasoned, They're emotionally stable. They've not been done in a rush. They've done with clear thought and clear mind. Have a backup plan. Almost every single person in your team doesn't also just have to have a why behind you've picked them. You also need to have the parachute of if they don't get picked. Now, the probabilities of the likes of a Jack McRae, I'm just running this Saints thing into the ground, or a Jack Steele, or a Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, the likelihood of them not being named is next to none, barring injury. But it's still important to have a backup plan so that you don't have a chaotic last few minutes. And to that's my third thing. Just don't panic. It's not going to help you. Be clinical about this. Be smart about this. You got this, okay, friend? You're totally fine. At the end of the day, one, not only is it a game that we enjoy playing, and it's not life or death situations, so it's not worth that level of emotional chaos and stress in your life and in your family. But also, just relax. Back your process in, back in the research that you've done, back in the decisions that you've made, and don't get rushed and flustered, especially if you know the why behind every player, and especially if you've got a backup plan. You should see yourself panic-free across all of round one, because you know what your outlets are and how you're going to avoid those elements. You know when the games are sitting. You know when you can loop. You know when your VC or C decision needs to get made. You don't need to panic if you've done the planning and you've done the work behind every single player. It's going to happen. You're going to be tempted to do it, but just don't. You'll be okay. Just don't panic. Fourth bit of advice and final checklist things I could give you is this, is a reminder you are going to make a mistake, quote unquote, in your starting squad, and you are going to need to correct it. Now, that mistake may just be you had absolute biased eyes for a player. You wouldn't be talked off the cliff of selecting them. And then while others were like, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? You were bullish and determined, which is absolutely fine. But now in the cold light of days, once the score has landed in AFL Fantasy, the price has already moved. You started to realize that was a mistake. An injury will pop. I know that's not a mistake, but you're going to need to correct course. And then there's always every year a guy that pops that we knew could, but really just absolutely slugs it, dominates in the first round, and they become someone we feel like we've got to get our way into them. At some point in the first week or two, you're going to recognize, I shouldn't have done that. With the knowledge I now know, I shouldn't have done that, and you're going to need to make correctional trades. That's totally okay. That's what your first 1, 2, 3 weeks, let alone your first 4, 5, 6 trades, are often correctional. It is, at the end of the day, a trading game. And while getting a good starting squad is a solid base, it's not that critical that if you miss 1 or 2 vital things, you hit a couple of mid-prices that flop. You cop an injury, whatever that actually is that goes wrong. You put the wrong rookie on field over the other. While it might hurt you in your eyes in the long run, it's probably not the defining decision. There's going to be thousands of decisions you make in season through the trading game, through players, positions on field, captains, vice captains. This probable one is not likely to be the difference. Every single coach is going to make some form of correctional trades in this first couple of weeks. I know in the years I've done really well from an overall rankings perspective and found myself in the top 20, 30 by the year's end. I've still gone back and gone, man, I butchered that. So it's absolutely okay. You are going to make mistakes or things that will be viewed as mistakes, either who you brought in or who you didn't get. You're going to need to correct them. It's okay. Mistakes happen. It is a trading game. The thing that makes the difference between success and not is correctly identifying the move you need to make and pulling the trigger on that and flicking the switch on that quickly and not dragging it out once you recognize something needs to change. Last 2 bits of advice I can give you to put on my fantasy footy checklist before we get to round 1 is, if you don't like the look of your team, when you look at it now, you look at your squad, if you don't like what it looks like, don't pick it. There's got to be a level of enjoyment here. There's got to be something that this is something you've putting hours of time and energy into. And at the end of the day, fantasy football is a game at its very core. And if it's not bringing you joy, why are you doing it? This is meant to be something that's an enjoyable outlet. It's meant to be a hobby. It's meant to be fun. I know we all want to do well and take it seriously and want to get a good rank, want to beat our mates, all those things. Yeah. We want to do all those things. But if you look at your team right now on your device and you're like, I don't like that pick, I don't like that pick, I don't like that pick. Even if you've gone through the why, at the end of the day, there's got to be some level of enjoyment that comes through this. And so if you don't like the look of your team right now, if you're just like, oh, this is gross, I know it's running out of time, but hit the clear team and go again and rebuild it, picking off what you know to be important, what you know to be done, and making sure there's a level of enjoyment that sits in that space. The game's going to give you enough heartache during the year. You want to at least make sure your starting squad, well, you know is strong and is ripe and is as good as you could make it to be, is not something that you look at disgust in. You want to be able to enjoy that team. And look, probably the last bit of advice I could give you for your checklist. So I've got the basics for you, the green dots, the ease on your benches, making sure that you know the why behind every player, that you've got a backup plan, that you're not panicking, that you know you're going to make some mistakes and correctional trades are going to be important. And it's just about how quickly you make them once you recognize something needs to change. That if you're not liking what you're seeing in your team, if it feels wrong and weird and awkward, then make some correctional changes to get you there. The last bit of advice that I could give you to have on your fantasy footy checklist is this. Do you have multiple options in the first month of the year that you feel confident to put the V, C, and C on in almost every single week? Yeah, we're all hunting value. Absolutely we are. We're looking for upside. We're looking to maximize our cash. We're looking to get into our top end guys as quick as we can. But really over the first month of the year, you're not making any upgrade trades at all. Even if you get into a premium, it's probably off the back of a failed mid-price or two. And so right now, go through your team. Do you have multiple guys that you feel confident can get you at least in AFL Fantasy 100 and at least a 110 in SuperCoach? Like the bare minimum threshold. Do you have some guys that can do that for you? And do you have players that can do that on a round specific, and have you identified which round specific that is? Or are they guys that can carry it through you through every single one of those weeks? It's why people prior to his injury were looking in SuperCoach, for example, at a Marcus Bontempelli, because they went, look, it almost doesn't matter who he's playing. I just feel like I could put the VC or C on him every single week. Well, for others in our team, we know it's more fixture matchups give us that favorable option to lean in and to look and go, oh, I think there's a score there. Predominantly, they're probably guys that play against the Tigers, but we're looking for these guys that are there. So do you have, over the first month, guys that you go, yes, I can forever put the VC or C on them, or are you having to run it week by week? If you don't have enough options, you're in trouble. You need multiple of these guys, and multiple is not two. You need more than two guys that either always theirs or week specifics, you could put the VC on. If you don't have more than two that you have confidence in, a minimum of 100 in fantasy and a minimum of a 110 in SuperCoach, you might need to make a change. This is where your score gets really accelerated. While we are trying to generate cash and maximize all these elements over the first 6 to 8 weeks of the year, we're also trying to bank some points and vitally important points. And with so much similarities in our team, we can get enough separation that just gets us in a good spot to really attack with our trading and our upgrade cadence by nailing that VCC, and having enough options to sit in that pocket just might be the difference for you. But what have you got of your final checklist? What are the things you go through before the Thursday night match? I probably should say, don't fiddle with the rest of your team on Thursday night once the teams are named. Just stick to it. Friday, come clear as day, you'll be fine. But what are the last minute checklist things you do in your fantasy footy side? I'd love to know. If you're watching this as a video on YouTube, would you comment below and let me know what have you got on your last minute checklist? If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, liked the video, got notifications on, friend, we've been giving you an episode a day since January 1. If you have loved what we've been able to serve you this preseason, the advice, the perspectives, the challenges that have been able to nurture through you, the feedback. It's a simple thing, but it's a huge thing for us. If you haven't done that yet, could you take the 2 seconds out of your day and do that? As well, if you're listening to this as an audio podcast, you haven't subscribed or given us the 5 stars, come on, friend, jump on board. We would so greatly appreciate that. Inside the description of the episode is where you could get in touch and follow and join the conversation with us across all our social media platforms. Inside this description, we also have your chance to become a Patreon. They have got an absolute truckload of great new Patreons that have come through this preseason. We're so thankful and grateful for them. If you've enjoyed what we've given you this preseason, you can jump in, even just at the base cash cow tier of a couple of bucks a month. You might not even notice it, but it does make a huge difference to us, right up to that breakout and premium tiers, where even more bonuses and content that doesn't get public, make sure you jump on board. And if you do want to get some Coaches Panel merch, we would so greatly appreciate you getting that as well. Hey, thanks so much. We hope you've enjoyed the Fantasy Footy preseason so far. Still plenty of episodes to come from the Coaches Panel here on the channel before we get into round 1. Hey, good luck. Go through the checklist. I hope it's been of help to you. We can't wait to be back with you again tomorrow, talking all things fantasy footy.